Hi everyone and welcome to my first Touchdesigner tutorial. I am Frei van Stiel, a design student and visual artist based in Germany. I do a lot of abstract interactive visuals that react to music in real time that I then put up at festivals and music events and stuff like this. I'm kind of new to the game, at least when it comes to uploading my stuff onto my social media pages. But recently I uploaded this particle effect video on TikTok and there was a number of people asking me how I did this, so here is the tutorial. This video is based on a tutorial by the YouTube channel Crazy Radio. I suggest you check them out, they have a lot of cool stuff and I will leave a link in the video description. Hey, quick side note, I uploaded the same video yesterday and Function Store texted me. You should also check him out, I will leave his link in the description. He is an amazing Touchdesigner, YouTuber and artist. And he pointed out or reminded me that working with channel operators with chops, with the green ones, puts a lot of strain onto your CPU. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because the GPU is just way faster and more efficient. So I optimized the setup. We're gonna scrap all of the chop parts. You will learn what that means later in the tutorial. And now the tutorial is even easier and it's easier for your computer as well and just quicker and better. Alrighty, this is my rendering setup in Touchdesigner, but two things first. One of them being this is not really a beginner-friendly tutorial. I suggest you already have worked with Touchdesigner or at least you have an idea about instancing and the geometry comp. I suppose you could also follow my video step by step if you're a complete beginner, but it's probably going to be a little bit confusing. And the second of them being, since I'm German and I looked through the internet and didn't find any German tutorials on Touchdesigner, if you're interested in that, just leave me a comment. Okay, so my rendering setup is divided into roughly 4 sections. The first of them being the instancing preparation. We have a video input, a control and an audio file. Then we are going to manipulate this stuff and prepare it for the instancing and rendering section, which is found here. Then I have another small section which is solely for moving the camera around in space a little bit. And then everything after the render node is the post section. Here we can put in nice effects like bloom or a color delay, and we can work with this later. Here we are in a new Touchdesigner file. I am going to delete everything and then we are going to be starting completely from scratch. But first I will prepare the work surface a little bit. So first I split the window and I'm going to change the right one to the top viewer. What this is going to do is allow you to see the result in the end. By the way, when I'm opening this, I can either do it with a double click with the left mouse button or with tab. And then you can type something and it's going to block out all the stuff that doesn't fit the letters. And here we have an out top. This is going to be our last operator in the whole setup. And when I display it, we can see the result on the right side. And here I'm going to disable the backdrop tops. Let me see, that was under display backdrop tops, like this. Okay, of course there's nothing to see right now, but if I were to input something, an operator into the last one, then you would see the result on the right side. I am going to start with the instancing and rendering setup. This is just so you can see the effects the preparation has on the instancing setup when I do this later. So the first thing we need is a box sub. That is just a 3D object, which is a box. And we will attach a transform after it. Transform, here it is. And we are going to make this box really small because this box is going to represent our particles. So we want to do it 0.001 of its original size. It's going to be really small. And then from here, by clicking the middle mouse, you can attach a geometry comp. Maybe there is another way of doing this, but I don't know how, because if you just do a geometry comp like this, then the little blue input is missing. So I'm just doing it all the time from the SOP operators. Going to delete this. Then we need 2 nulls. And you can put both of them out by pressing and holding the shift key and then clicking null 2 times. So now we have 2 nulls here. One of them is going to be the target for the cam to look at. So we are going to call it cam target. You don't need to do this. I'm just doing it so it's a little bit more clear what I'm doing. And the other one is going to be the cam mover, so we are going to attach the cam to it. Cam mover. Then we need a camera. I'm going to put this here. And we can also directly connect the stuff. So the cam target is going to be the look at constraint. So the cam looks at this null. And the cam mover is going to be the constraint too. So this is like, if you know 3D programs, this is like a parent. So if I move the null, the camera moves as well. Then we need a render top. And yeah, it's already connected to the out automatically. And we need a light and another light. We need a normal light under the light comp. I'm going to put this here, and an environment light. And this environment light is so we can use a PBR material, a physically based rendering material. This only works with PBR in my experience. Then we need another top. This is the movie file in top. I'm going to put it here. And this movie file in top, normally there is the banana, but you can just choose this HDRI image that is provided by Touchdesigner. So if I make this, click this little button here, the viewer, you can see the content. And if I now drag this onto the environment light, the environment light would display this blue color, but we don't want any color, so we can put a monochrome after it. Now the video is, the image is in black and white, and we can put this into the environment map. So now the light is displaying this HDRI image. Now that we have that, we also need the material. So under the blue one, the yellow one, we need the PBR material, and we can put this onto the geometry comp. So now in the render you see nothing because the box is really small, but if I were to make the box bigger again, you would see, yeah, you would see this box here. I want it small again, 0.001, like this. The next thing we need to do is changing this environment light so it is a little bit more strong, a little bit stronger. I'm going to put the dimmer to 10. And if I now were to make the box a little bit bigger again, you would see that it is now white because the light is way brighter and not so dark as it was in the beginning. So now that is the whole rendering and instancing setup, and I already put an annotation comp here. It's under the comp section, we have annotate here, and it's like a post-it. So we can give it a name. I'm going to call it instancing and rendering, like this. And again here, if I press the C tab, I can give it a color. I'm going to make it purple. And the advantage of the annotation is first you see like the whole section, or you have the region and everything is together visually. And also if you move the annotation around, the operators move with the annotation. So that is the whole instancing setup. Now I'm coming to the preparation for the instancing, and we need 4 inputs for this. The first one being a movie file in, which is normally the banana, but I'm going to change this into a video I already prepared, which also has an aspect ratio of 1:1, so it's a square. This is a drone shot in a, what do you call it, an abandoned building by Niels Vollenbruch. He does drone shots like this on Instagram and YouTube. I asked him for his permission. If you want to do stuff like this as well, please ask the people also. Then we need a transform top later. This is if you don't have a square aspect video, you can use the transform top to change the aspect later. I'm going to bypass this for now, but first the other inputs. We need a slider for controlling the strength of the displacement. Then a constant that is going to be the resolution. So I'm going to call it res. And why not also call the channel res with a small r. And I want a resolution of 300 by 300, so I'm already putting this in. And then the last thing we need is an audio file in. You can put whatever you want into this. I'm just going to leave it as the normal Touchdesigner audio file in. You can also put an audio device out after it, so you hear what the music is playing. In Touchdesigner's example is this audio loop. I'm just going to deactivate the audio device out for now. So the next thing we need is a blur top. By the way, top stands for texture operator, chop is channel operator, surface operator, materials, data, and component, just if you were wondering. The blur we can deactivate as well. Then we need a level top. I'm going to put this here. And a resolution top. And the resolution top is kind of important. So the first thing I'm going to do is making it a little bit bigger. And the second thing I'm going to do is attach a null to the constant we made in the beginning, the resolution constant. I'm going to place it under the resolution, and by pressing either A or pressing this little cross down here, we can make it viewer active, and that helps us to take this input and just drag and drop it onto the resolution, which we first need to make a custom resolution. Now I can use this null and import the chop with a chop reference. So now every time we change this resolution over here, for example by clicking the middle mouse button and then dragging it, it's going to change the resolution also down here. But we want to keep it at 300 for now. And then I'm going to press the little cross here again, so it's not viewer active anymore. And by the way, if your computer has problems handling all this stuff, you can just drag your right mouse button over everything and then disable the viewer. And this is going to greatly enhance your performance, because otherwise Touchdesigner would need to work on every single operator. Okay, after the, let me see if I'm recording. Yes, I am, okay. After the resolution top, we need another operator, which is hue, saturation, and value adjust. But we don't need it for now. This is just if we later want to make the video either colorful or black and white, we can just, here, turn this knob, but we don't need it for now. And after the HSV adjust, we put a null. And this is our final null, at least when it comes to the tops in this row here. And we're going to call it color, because this is going to be our instancing top for the color. You will see what I mean by this later. Okay, and now we come to the mentioned optimization part. As you remember, maybe in the beginning I used a lot of channel operators, but now we want to do this all with tops to use the graphics card, which is just faster. So the next thing we need is a noise top. And noise operators are really powerful operators in Touchdesigner. You can use them all the time to make really interesting and kind of unpredictable abstract visuals. And we use this random pattern to randomize the displacement of the video a little bit, because otherwise it would just look a little bit boring. The first thing we want to do is to zoom into the noise a little bit, and we do that by putting up the slider of the period to 2. Then we also want to get rid of all the subdivisions of the noise, and we do that by decreasing the harmonics to 0. Then the last thing we want to do is an exponent of 1.1, and what that is going to do is making the noise a little bit more smooth, a little bit smoother. And then we also want a lower offset. I can show you what that does, because we need the video input in the noise. The first input is, I think, resolution and backdrop image. Yeah, background image. And the second one is the coordinate map of the original video. We use that as well. And here you can see if I turn down the offset, the video is getting a little bit darker. So if I were to turn it up, it would get really bright. We don't want that. So we want an offset of 0.06 for now. All right, if we have that, we can now imagine we want to use this video to displace the particles that are going to show up here in the end in the Z direction, so towards the camera. But we also want to have a grid in the beginning where the particles are situated in a square. And we do that by adding a grid SOP. I'm going to put it right here. Right now, this grid SOP has a resolution of 20 by 20 pixels, or 20 by 20 points, I guess. And we want to have the same resolution as in the video. That's important for the instancing. So we can use our resolution null again and drag and drop this value onto the rows and as well onto the columns. And now if I zoom in here really, really far, you can see it's a really fine grid. And now what we want to do is use this grid to situate the particles in a square, and then we want to use the video to move the particles in the Z direction, in the direction of the camera. And here you can see three colors. We have red for the x-axis, green for the y-axis, and Z is the blue axis. And this is really important later, so keep it in mind. After this grid, we use a null, just for good measure. And now we want to go into the top world, but that isn't possible directly, so we use a little detour over the channel operators with a SOP to chop. So this translates all of this information into channels. And now we want to go from chop to top. And we do this by using a chop2 operator, so that turns the channel operation information into texture operation again. But you can see we only have a small line here. We want a square, so we use this image layout and we don't use rows per channel, but fit to square. And it looks kind of strange. That's because the top2 or chop2 is only using red, but we want red, green, and blue. That's the first thing we do. And we have now, as you can see here, as I explained in the green and red axis, we have this layout here. And now we need to add blue information to move the points in the Z-axis. And we do that by getting the blue information out of this video. And we can use a level top for this. Level tops have this RGBA tab here, the third one. And you can tweak all the different colors. We don't need any alpha, so we put that to 0. We don't need any green, and we don't need any red. So now you're left with only the blue information out of this video. The catch is in the original video or in the original visual, I used the red in the chop world to displace the video. So if you want to have exactly the same look, do what I do now. If it doesn't matter to you, you can just work with this. We use a hue saturation value after this. Now we go back to the level and we don't use the blue but the red information as I did in the original video. So we turn the high red up to 1 again, and then we need to convert this color into blue. And we can do this by offsetting the hue by 240, so red turns into blue. And now we want to combine those two position operators, or that are used for position, and we do that by using a reorder. And just that it looks a little bit cleaner, I'm going to use the first two inputs as red and green, so input 1 is red and input 2 is green. And then I'm going to use the third input as blue. So here you need to choose input 3, and then alpha we don't need, so we just put the fourth tab to 0. So here we have the combination of the blue and green, or the red and green for the X and Y axis, and the blue for the Z displacement. Just for good measure, let's put a null after this again and call it pos, because this is our final top for the position. So we can also use our color top we did a few minutes ago and put that up here. So you have these two operators as our last operators for color and position, and use them in the geometry comp. So use the pos operator as the translate OP, and then you can see nothing happens. And this is because we need to input the colors here. You can either use this drop-down menu and put them in manually, or also not manually, but this is manual as well, but just put in red, green, and blue with the keyboard. And then in the Instancing 2 tab, we can go to color, which is down here. And we can input the color operator and put in red, green, and blue as well. Green and blue, like this. And then you can see on the right side there's already something happening. And if your video is not in a square aspect as mine, this is because I already changed the resolution of my render top. You can do this under the comment tab, the last one here. I put my resolution to 1080 by 1080. In the free version, 1280 by 1280 is the maximum. You could also do this or whatever you want. I'm going to make this window a little bit bigger. And then you can also see it's transparent in the background. And to change this, there is a number of possibilities. The most common one, I guess, is to use the transform top. And in the transform top, we have three colors here, red, green and blue. They are at 0, so we have black, and the alpha is at 0 as well. So we input an alpha of 1 and also use check on here the comp over background, and that way we have the composition over the background. There's also an easier way. I don't know if this takes more computing power or not. You can also just input an RGB key and be done automatically. So it has a black background now. So this is our result now. The video is displaced. We have the colors of the pixels, and the pixels are displaced in the Z direction by blue, or actually by the red color. Let's make the visual react to music in the next step, and we do this by using our audio file in we put there in the beginning. So I'm just going to show it to you again. This is just the standard Touchdesigner audio file, and we want to use this waveform and turn it into a changing number value. And you could also build your own audio analysis tools. This has the advantage that the tools are just way slimmer and quicker, like the stuff I did here. If you're interested, I can show you, but also just you can look for the tutorials by Elektronaut or Bilam Chepe on YouTube. He has an amazing tutorial on building stuff like this. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just use the audio analysis tool by Touchdesigner right now. So this is under the palette browser, tools, audio analysis tool. We input the music into this tool, and then we can already see the lows are activated, and we have some kind of some kind of reaction to the music. But we want to make this movement a little bit smoother. This works by making the operator viewer active and then turning up the smoothness. You could also just work with the values right here in the operator window. If we turn up the smoothness, the bass amplitude is just moving a little bit cleaner. And then I can also turn up the gain if I'm already here. After this, I'm using a select top, because I don't want all this stuff, I only want the lows. And I'm going to use this to drive my HSV, my blue, or whatever your blue operator is, either the level or the HSV, to increase or decrease the movement of the particles in the Z direction. If I'm here, I'm also using a null after the slider I put here in the beginning. We can use this slider to later generally intensify or lessen the movement of the particles by moving the slider around. So we can use those two operators and combine them with a math. Chop, combine chops, multiply. Now if I multiply them only like this, I'm using this value and then I'm decreasing it even further because the slider that I have goes from 0 to 1. So I want to increase my value a little bit more. I'm going to multiply and add, and multiplying this number by 2. And then I'm just putting a null after this for good measure again, and using this bass amp to increase my blue. And I can do this by inserting a math operator, or a math top in this case. Oh no, not top, but math top, between my last blue operator and my reorder. And I'm going to the multiply and add page, and here I'm just using this bass amplification and putting it into the multiply. And then one last trick you can do to never be at complete 0 is just to input 0.1 or to add 0.1 after the multiplication. So you always have a little bit of displacement going on. So now our visual is reacting to the music. And also I can use the slider to decrease or increase the reaction to the music. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is the camera movement. So I decrease this window again so we have a little bit better overview. I'm going to add another annotation. because I said so in the beginning, and I kind of forgot it in the changement of the tutorial. This is going to be our instancing preparation. I turned off the timeline by using a spacebar. I'm going to make this yellow. And the last thing we do is the cam movement, or actually not the last thing, I lied, because we also do the post effects. But for the camera movement, we use another annotation. Put it right up here. Let's make it blue and call it cam mover. This time without stopping the timeline. I'm going to use a select chop again, because select chops also work in another way. I want to avoid having an ugly cable going all the way up here. So I'm putting a select chop up there, and then I'm using my base amp and putting it into this chops window, or this, I don't know, where it says chops up here in my operator window. So we just copied the lows up here without having this ugly cable. And we are going to use the lows to drive two LFOs. LFOs are low frequency oscillators. So oscillating tools that are oscillating between two number values. We have a sine, we have a Gaussian that's going from 0 to 1. But we want the sine. Also, we don't want to have such a big amplitude. We want an amplitude of 0.3. So it goes from 0.3 to minus 0.3. And then we want to animate this LFO by the base amplification. And one way to do this is by putting this frequency to 0, so it doesn't move on its own. And then using this value to drive the LFO by using the phase. The phase is like the beginning point of the LFO. So if we animate the phase, as you can see here, it's going back and forth. Next thing we need is a speed with double E, not double P. And what a speed chop does is it combines all the values it gets and just puts out a growing number. And we can use this growing number to animate our LFO. So we make it viewer active, drag and drop it onto the face. And now, as you can see, it moves according to the base. The last thing we can do is input another math chop here and multiply this number if the movement is too fast. For my taste, it's too fast, so I'm multiplying this by 0.4. So the number grows slower and the LFO doesn't move so fast. I'm going to copy this because we use one of the LFO to drive the camera up and down and one to drive it to the left and to the right. And I don't want to move it at the same time, because that would mean the camera would just move from the bottom left to the top right, or the other way around, but just in a straight line. I want kind of a circle, maybe not perfect. So I can offset one face by just adding some number value. So I offset the face by a half, or almost a half. So now we have two offset sine waves, and we use them to drive our cam mover. Because the camera is attached to the cam mover, we can use the LFOs. Let's make them viewer active, and one of them, use them to drive the X, and one of them to drive the Y. And now the camera is moving a little bit in a circle and is not looking at this visual from the front all the time. And the last thing I can do is to animate how close the camera is to this grid. So let's use a third LFO. I don't want to animate the getting closer and further away with the base. I just want it to be a smooth motion. So let's make it a frequency of 0.1, so one sine wave every 10 seconds. The amplitude is way too big. I want an amplitude of 0.1. And also I don't want the camera to be at 0, but at -1. So let's make it an offset of 1. Or not, the camera is not at -1, but at 1. What did I do now? I made my other annotation way too big. So like this. And we can use the third LFO to drive the X value. So go to the cam mover, make this viewer active, and put, not X, Z value, and put it into the Z. As you can see now, the camera is quite far away, and that is because we still have some translation in the camera itself. I'm going to put this to 0. And now we have the cam mover to move the camera around, and you can always just change the number here to put the camera further away or nearer to or closer to the visual as you want it. Okay, the last thing that remains is our post effects. For that, I've already put up an annotation, made it red and called it post. And we can put image effects here after the render. 2 image effects I want to show you are in the palette browser by Touchdesigner under image filters. The first one is, or one of them is the RGBA delay, and the second one is the bloom. Bloom is kind of a glowing effect. RGBA is a delay of colors. I can show them to you by themselves, like this. So the RGBA changes the colors, it delays them. Right now, red is delayed by 15, green by 10, and blue by 5. That's way too much for me and also the wrong order for my taste. I want to change it to 3, green 2, and blue -1. And the bloom, let me just input the bloom, so exchange the direct connection for the connection with the bloom, so we can see what's happening on the right side. Right now it looks kind of dumb, and that's because we need to change some stuff. The first thing is the threshold is way too high, so I'm going to input 0.06 here, and this just means pixels don't need to be this bright for bloom to be applied. Then also the glow color, I don't want it to be blue but white. And then the last thing is just turn down this value of the glow ramp because, oh no, not this one 1 second. Here, this value of the glow ramp, because the glow ramp has some strange colors and we don't want this. So now we can also increase the intensity a little bit, and if this is still too dark for you, just decrease the threshold even further. And then the last thing we can do is to change the input level. So this is like a mix between the original, oh no, a mix between the bloom and, okay. Yeah, let's just leave it like this. So it has a little bit of glow. If we want to make the image brighter, we can also use the level we put here all the way in the beginning and make the image a little bit brighter. I already did this, so I input some gamma and some brightness. Maybe let's decrease the gamma a little bit and the brightness a little bit, but it's over 1, so now we can see it a little bit better. And then the last thing I want to show you is the RGBA delay. So let's input this here and exchange the connection. And right now we have all the effects. If you don't want to mix the RGBA with the colors, we can always use our HSV adjust. We put here after the resolution in the beginning, turn it on, and I already put a saturation of 0. So now we only have the RGBA effect. That wraps up my first Touchdesigner tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, I'm happy if you leave a like for the video, and also if you have questions or constructive criticism or feedback or some kind of request for the next tutorial, leave it in the comments. I will read all of them. And also, if you made it until here, thank you a lot for giving me your attention, and I hope my video was easy enough to follow. Yeah, see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.